You've been told your whole life to be agreeable, to be likable, to smile more, not rock the boat, and make sure everyone in the room feels comfortable. They said it was the path to connection, influence, and success. What if they were wrong? The most powerful figures in history, the ones who build empires, reshape industries, and change the world often, don't prioritize being liked. In fact, some barely seem to try. They understand a dark and uncomfortable truth that the rest of us are taught to ignore. In the unforgiving calculus of power, the desperate need to be liked is a profound vulnerability. The moment you stop seeking universal affection is the moment you can start earning genuine respect. This isn't about being a tyrant. It's about understanding the hidden architecture of human influence. The choice isn't between being a saint or a monster. The real choice, the one that defines legacies, is between being liked and being effective, and the powerful have already made their decision. Let's be honest for a moment. Think about all the times you've put someone else's comfort before your own conviction. How many times have you bitten your tongue in a meeting? Not because you were wrong, but because you didn't want to create tension. How often have you said yes to something you knew was unreasonable, just to avoid disappointing someone? You were being agreeable. You were being likable. But what has that really earned you? For most, the answer is frustratingly little. This behavior, this constant striving for approval, is the likability trap. It's a cage built from good intentions, but a cage nonetheless. In this trap, your boundaries are treated as mere suggestions. Your time is seen as endlessly available. Your goodwill is an exploitable resource. You become reliable, yes, but you're reliably overlooked for the promotion. You're reliably nice, but you're not seen as a leader. Your voice becomes pleasant background noise, easy to ignore. The psychology here is well understood. Agreeableness is a wonderful quality for a friend, but in the arenas of power business, politics, any competitive hierarchy and checked agreeableness can be a fatal flaw. It signals to others that your mission is secondary to their feelings. It broadcasts a willingness to compromise on core principles in exchange for a fleeting moment of social validation. This isn't just theoretical. Look at the corporate world. Here's a persistent, though debated narrative around Jerry Yang's time as CEO of Yahoo. Yang was widely seen as a deeply kind and well-liked persona. Nice guy, co-founder of an internet titan. Yet, during a critical period, many analyses point to a culture of conflict avoidance that made it difficult to make the brutal, unpopular decisions necessary to pivot and survive in a ruthless market. While Yahoo's challenges were complex, this narrative suggests that a desire to maintain harmony may have hindered the company's ability to adapt, serving as a stark example of how a leader's virtue can become a vulnerability. The likability trap teaches you to measure your worth by the absence of conflict. But real progress is often born from productive conflict. Conflict over ideas, conflict over resources, conflict over the direction of the future. The person unwilling to endure the temporary displeasure of others is the person who will never lead them anywhere meaningful. They remain trapped in the comfortable, stagnant, present perpetually liked, but ultimately powerless. This painful choice between being liked and being effective is hardly a modern problem. For centuries, leaders have grappled with this very dilemma, struggling to balance the demands of compassion and strength, charisma and control. But it was a 16th century Florentine diplomat, Machiavelli, who articulated it with such stark and unsettling clarity that his name became synonymous with the dark arts of power. In his legendary work, the Prince Machiavelli wasn't writing a moral philosophy. He was writing a practical, real-world guidebook for rulers on how to gain and, more importantly, maintain power. He had a unique perspective, shaped by his experiences in the cutthroat politics of Renaissance Italy, where shifting alliances and constant betrayals were a daily reality. His observations were based not on abstract ideals, but on the harsh, often ugly reality of political survival. In his eyes, the primary responsibility of a ruler was to secure and strengthen their position at all costs. And if that meant making choices that were less than popular, so be it. Machiavelli analyzed the great leaders of his time, those who had succeeded and those who had failed, and distilled a set of cold, pragmatic principles. He didn't offer vague, idealistic advice. Instead, he provided a blueprint for effective governance, one that didn't sugarcoat the uncomfortable truths of power. At the heart of his analysis is chapter 17, which asks the famous question, is it better to be loved than feared, or the reverse? This seemingly simple query has sparked centuries of debate, and Machiavelli's answer has often been misinterpreted. His conclusion is frequently quoted as a simple endorsement of tyranny, but his argument is far more nuanced, offering a deeper insight into the nature of power. He begins by admitting that, ideally, a ruler would be both loved and feared. Who wouldn't want that? The ideal leader, in his view, would inspire affection from his subjects, while also commanding respect through the threat of consequences. The perfect leader would be both a protector and a force to be reckoned with, someone whose very presence evokes loyalty and fear in equal measure. But then comes the famous caveat. ... Because it is difficult to unite them in one person, it is much safer to be feared than loved. When, of the two, either must be dispensed with, this is not a call to cruelty. It's a pragmatic risk assessment. Machiavelli wasn't advocating for unbridled tyranny. He was suggesting that, in the brutal game of power, it is far safer to inspire fear than to rely on love, which he considered an unstable and often fleeting force. Let that sink in. This isn't a celebration of cruelty or sadism. It's a calculated decision grounded in the harsh realities of leadership. Machiavelli saw love as a dangerously unreliable foundation for power. He argued that love is preserved by a link of obligation, which, owing to the baseness of men, is broken at every opportunity for their advantage. In other words, people love you when it's convenient. They love you when their interests align with yours. But the moment their needs or desires change, that bond of love snaps. They'll turn on you in an instant, without hesitation or remorse. Fear, on the other hand, is built on something far more dependable: self-preservation. As he puts it, fear preserves you by a dread of punishment, which never fails. Fear of retribution, of consequences, is something that never wavers. When people fear you, they act in accordance with your desires, not out of affection, but out of necessity. Fear is a promise of consequences that you make to them. It is a foundation rooted in the deep, primal instinct to protect oneself, which is far less fickle than the human need for affection. Crucially, though, and this is the part his critics always forget, Machiavelli draws a sharp and unmissable line between being feared and being hated. To be feared is to be respected as a force with clear consequences. To be hated is to be seen as cruel, unpredictable, and predatory, which inspires not obedience, but rebellion. He warned, a prince ought to inspire fear in such a way that, if he does not win love, he avoids hatred. How does one achieve this delicate balance? By not being greedy, Machiavelli suggests. By not seizing the property or violating the honor of his subjects. A ruler must avoid acting in ways that are unnecessarily harsh or capricious, as this would breed resentment. The use of fear should be strategic, justified, and rare. Machiavelli's world was one of brutal survival, and for him, a leader's sentimentality was a direct threat to the stability of the state. He wasn't advising princes to be evil. He was advising them to understand that, in order to protect the greater good, the ruler must sometimes make difficult and unpopular decisions. The shepherd must be willing to do things the sheep won't understand. To be a ruler is not to be liked by everyone. It is to be a force that commands respect, one whose very presence elicits a response, whether positive or negative, that ensures the stability of the state. The leader must understand that in moments of crisis, love will not sustain him, but fear tempered with reason and care will ensure his survival and the survival of the state he governs. Thus, Machiavelli's teachings are not a call for blind tyranny, but a recognition of the pragmatic realities of leadership. He reminds us that, at the end of the day, a ruler's duty is to maintain power, protect the state, and secure the well-being of his people, regardless of whether he is loved or feared. It is a painful and often thankless task, but one that demands a ruler's full understanding of both human nature and the delicate balance of power. 500 years after Machiavelli, science has mapped the very neural circuits that prove his intuitions were so disturbingly accurate. The choice between inspiring love and instilling fear isn't just a philosophical debate. It's a choice between two very different systems in the human brain, each tapping into a distinct emotional and cognitive response. In fact, the science of human behavior now affirms, what Machiavelli seemed to understand so well the deep divide between fear and love is a foundational element of leadership, with profound implications for how people respond, collaborate, and succeed. Fear is one of our most ancient and potent motivators. It triggers the amygdala, the brain's internal alarm system, flooding the body with adrenaline and cortisol. This biological reaction has evolved over millennia to ensure survival in dangerous environments. The fight-or-flight response compels immediate action, sharpening focus on the perceived threat and eliminating distractions. Fear is a blunt instrument, but it's undeniably effective for ensuring compliance when safety or security is at stake. Under the threat of fear, we are driven to obey orders, follow commands, and avoid repercussions, which is why it has been used so extensively throughout history by those in power. However, this tool comes with heavy costs. While fear can produce short-term compliance, chronic fear is toxic to the higher-level cognitive functions needed for long-term success, especially in complex environments. It impairs memory, crushes creative problem-solving, and erodes the willingness to take smart risks. In environments where fear dominates, individuals become more focused on survival than on growth or innovation. This is especially evident in organizations that are run on personal fear. Such workplaces might meet their immediate targets, but they will struggle to be centers of creativity and change. Employees will do exactly what they are told, then no more. They will avoid sharing mistakes, thinking that doing so will expose them to punishment. Fear creates a culture of stagnation, where people are paralyzed by the possibility of failure and the potential for growth is stifled. On the other hand, love, or, in a leadership context, trust and respect operates on a completely different psychological wavelength. It is associated with feelings of connection, safety, and collaboration. This is the foundation of true loyalty. Research from major organizations like Gallup and McKinsey has consistently shown that followers have 4 deep-seated needs: trust, compassion, stability, and hope. When these needs are met, it unlocks motivation rooted in inspiration, not intimidation. A leader who builds trust does more than just gain compliance. They inspire action. They create a space where people feel safe to contribute their ideas, take risks, and work together toward a common goal. This is the kind of leadership that fosters psychological safety, a shared belief that it's safe to take interpersonal risks, to be vulnerable, and to voice differing opinions. In environments where psychological safety is prioritized, people feel encouraged to admit mistakes, challenge the status quo, and innovate. This is where the best ideas are born. Creativity flows freely when people aren't afraid of being punished for failure. And collaboration thrives when individuals trust each other's intentions. A leader who has earned trust doesn't just get compliance, they get engagement. They receive the full, creative, passionate energy of their people, driving the organization to new heights. So why would anyone still choose fear? Because building trust is slow, difficult, and fragile. It requires immense consistency and emotional vulnerability from the leader. Trust is earned over time through repeated actions, transparent communication, and a demonstrated commitment to the well-being of others. It can be shattered in a moment, and once broken, it takes far longer to rebuild. Fear, by contrast, is a shortcut. It's immediate, it's powerful, and it requires no emotional openness from the leader. Fear creates a false sense of control, allowing leaders to maintain compliance in the short term without engaging the full capacities of their team. The truly powerful leaders understand this distinction. They may use the fear of failure or the fear of losing to a competitor as a unifying force, but they are cautious about making their people fear them personally. They know that fear-based control can achieve results, but only at the cost of long-term trust and creativity. They are skilled at leveraging fear when necessary, but they never allow it to become the sole driver of motivation. Instead, they prioritize trust, knowing that a foundation of trust can support a skyscraper of achievement, while a foundation of fear can only support a prison. Leaders who build their influence on trust recognize that it is the key to unlocking the full potential of their teams. They understand that trust is the catalyst for growth, innovation, and resilience. A culture of trust fosters collaboration, enables smart risk-taking, and creates a sense of shared purpose that propels people to perform beyond expectations. Conversely, leaders who rely solely on fear create environments where compliance is achieved, but creativity, problem-solving, and engagement are sacrificed. In the long run, trust-driven leadership is the only sustainable path to meaningful success and progress. This distinction between fear and love, between compliance and engagement, is not just a theoretical concept, it's a real choice that every leader must make. The choice between motivating through fear and motivating through trust determines not only the immediate outcomes of leadership, but also the long-term health and success of any organization, relationship, or society. The truly effective leaders are those who know when to inspire fear and when to build trust. And they understand that while fear may win battles, only trust can win wars. The principles Machiavelli outlined weren't confined to Renaissance Italy. They resonate in the boardrooms of Silicon Valley and the halls of power today. The essence of Machiavelli's ideas continues to influence modern leadership, from corporate giants to political figures. But the most effective contemporary leaders didn't simply choose fear over love. They mastered a dynamic and, at times, uncomfortable synthesis of both. They understood that wielding fear alone can be destructive, but harnessing both fear and admiration in the right proportions could create something extraordinary. Take the example of Steve Jobs. His story is a modern legend, one of a leader who was simultaneously feared and revered. Jobs was infamous for his brutal honesty, his uncompromising standards, and his complete intolerance for mediocrity. He had a reputation for being an extremely difficult boss, often harsh in his criticism and relentless in his demands. Employees dreaded his sharp tongue and volcanic temper, yet they also admired his genius and drive. By any conventional measure, Jobs was not a likable leader in the traditional sense. Many employees genuinely feared his wrath, but they also respected his brilliance. However, to say Apple's monumental success came from fear alone is to miss the point entirely. Jobs didn't merely instill fear, he inspired awe. The fear employees felt was not a terror of arbitrary punishment, but the terror of disappointing a visionary. He welded his high demands to a vision so compelling and inspiring that people were willing to endure immense pressure just to be a part of it. Jobs made his employees feel that they were part of something far greater than themselves, that they were making a dent in the universe. The fear he instilled was the fear of not being good enough to contribute to that historic mission. It was a fear not of failure itself, but of failing to meet the potential of the extraordinary vision he set forth. Jobs was respected, not for his kindness, but for his unwavering, almost inhuman, commitment to excellence. His leadership was driven by a higher purpose, one that transcended the harshness of his approach. Similarly, look at Jeff Bezos during Amazon's early years. Reports from that era, such as a notable 2015 New York Times, described a brutally competitive gladiator culture at Amazon, where only the strongest survived under Bezos's relentless scrutiny. But once again, this wasn't arbitrary cruelty. Bezos famously tethered every demanding standard to his obsessive focus on the customer experience. The internal pressure employees felt was not just a consequence of an unforgiving workplace, but a reflection of a principle far larger than individual discomfort: the relentless pursuit of customer satisfaction. Every sleepless night, every sacrifice, was framed as a necessary step toward becoming the world's most customer-centric company. The fear within Amazon was directed outward at competitors, at mediocrity, at failure, and this unyielding drive for excellence became a unifying force within the company. However, it's crucial to distinguish this demanding, vision-oriented leadership from what is often referred to as dark psychology or manipulative behavior. A truly powerful leader, like Jobs, uses pressure to mold teams into something stronger and more resilient, pushing them to achieve beyond their perceived limits. They understand that excellence comes with a cost: long hours, intense scrutiny, and personal sacrifice. But they do this with a purpose that extends beyond personal gain. It's about building something lasting, something greater than oneself. A weak leader, on the other hand, who merely imitates the surface-level behavior of these strong visionaries, uses psychological manipulation as a tool for their own sense of power. They employ tactics like the silent treatment, triangulation, or love bombing to create dependency anxiety, and confusion. These manipulative behaviors are not designed to build an empire, but to maintain control over individuals. They foster an environment where trust is eroded and loyalty is based on fear of retaliation rather than respect for a shared goal. These tactics are not the hallmarks of a visionary leader. They are the marks of abusive supervision. The key distinction lies in purpose. The modern Machiavellian leader, like Jobs or Bezos, anchors their fearsome standards to a transcendent vision. They inspire others by creating a sense of shared purpose and belief in something far larger than any individual's desires. Their leadership is about building something monumental, an empire that will stand the test of time. They understand that fear can be a powerful motivator when tied to a higher cause. But they also understand that without that higher cause, fear becomes a corrosive force. On the other hand, the manipulator has no higher purpose. They may use fear to control and dominate, but their motivations are personal. They seek only to preserve their power and control. The manipulator builds a dungeon where people are kept in a state of constant anxiety and dependence, unable to escape their grip. They do not inspire greatness. They create a toxic environment where people are driven by survival, not ambition or innovation. The manipulator's world is a prison, whereas the leader who balances fear and love can create a kingdom. To sum it up, the truly powerful understand this balance. They know when to use fear as a tool to push their teams to reach new heights, but they also understand that trust and respect are the foundations of lasting success. Fear used correctly can foster unity, commitment, and an unwavering drive to succeed, but it must always be anchored to a vision that transcends the immediate challenges. The manipulator, in contrast, uses fear for their own purposes, creating a culture of dependency that stifles growth and breeds resentment. One builds an empire, the other builds a dungeon. For too long, we've been trapped in a false dichotomy. Is it better to be feared or loved? This question forces us into a corner, suggesting our only options are to be a soft-hearted friend or a cold-hearted tyrant. But the most effective leaders show us this is the wrong question. The real goal isn't to be loved, nor is it to be feared for its own sake. The ultimate aim is to be respected. Respect is the synthesis. It's an alloy forged in the heat of high expectations, but cooled with consistency and integrity. It contains elements of fear, the fear of failing to meet a standard you know is fair. And it contains elements of love, the loyalty to a leader who has proven their competence and commitment. So, how is this respected power built? It starts by rejecting likability as a primary goal. Instead, it's built on a framework championed by researchers like Harvard's Amy Edmondson, combining high accountability with high psychological safety. This sounds like a paradox, but it's not. High accountability is the fear component. Properly channeled, it means standards are crystal clear and exceptionally high. Performance is measured, and excuses aren't tolerated. This creates a healthy fear of mediocrity. High psychological safety is the modern love or trust component. It means that while the standards for performance are unforgiving, the environment is forgiving of people. It means individuals feel safe to speak up, disagree, admit a mistake early, and take the creative risks needed to meet those high standards. A leader doesn't punish the person for failing. They analyze the process with them. The message is, I will hold you to a standard you may not believe you can reach, and I will give you the trust and safety you need to get there. This is the path of respected power. It's not about being nice. It's about being effective, fair, and trustworthy. It is built through deliberate actions. First, define your mission and principles with absolute clarity. Respect isn't granted to the inconsistent. Second, master the art of boundaries. Learn to say no to distractions, to low standards, and to your own desire to please. Every no uttered in defense of your principles builds your authority. Third, shift your focus from managing feelings to managing the mission. Your job isn't to make everyone happy. It's to define reality and give hope by charting a clear path forward, especially when it's difficult. Finally, embody competence. Respect is, above all, a tribute to ability. Be the best at what you do. People will forgive a leader who is demanding if they know that leader is a winner. Competence is the ultimate currency of power. For centuries, we've been sold a comforting lie that being agreeable is the key to the kingdom. We're taught that if we're just accommodating enough, the world will reward us with influence. But the architecture of power rests on a harder foundation. It rests on the truth Machiavelli wrote down 500 years ago. Love is fleeting, but the consequences of crossing a respected leader are not. The goal was never just to be liked. It was never to be feared out of cruelty. The goal is to be respected, a complex equation of competence, consistency, and the courage to hold people to a higher standard. The journey to true power begins with a single, liberating act, abandoning the desperate need to be liked. It's the moment you stop asking for permission to lead and start earning the right to be followed. It's when you realize your purpose isn't to make people comfortable, but to make them better. You may lose some friends along the way, but you will earn something far more valuable and enduring: their respect. And with that, you can actually change things. If these ideas resonate with you, subscribe for more deep dives into the psychology of power and influence. And let us know in the comments. In your experience, is it better to be feared or loved?